Hey yo, welcome back to Glorious Vibes. Um, Sunny day, beautiful day, excellent day today, and out here just enjoying. It's fun. You know, hanging out and by myself. Thought I'd come in the last video. You saw me. I was with my boy. We were going out for his basketball practice, and I shared with you that the next next phase of this is me sharing about talking about parenting in general. And so yeah, this is one of those. I'm starting this series right now about parenting to see how far it takes me. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of topics to be discussed there as it relates to parenting, especially in this day and age. And so there'll be plenty of conversation to be had about that. Again, I'm inviting you to chime in, join in and comment and give additional topics if you would like to. Again, this is all about spreading vibes and all of us kind of learning together in this space. It's not just about me or anything like that. It's really all of us learning together and being better together. So I thought I would start somewhere around like the question of values, in terms of just parenting and parenthood, and for me particularly, fatherhood, which is really important, the question of values. And I bring up values because values are important, right? Especially when you talk about raising a kid in a multicultural family, right? Where they have like they're growing up in a family that has one certain set of values, and they go to school and it's a different set of values, right? Let's just be honest with that, right? For our kids, for example, we have African values that we were raised with, and they go to school and they get to learn some other things. Doesn't mean that we don't share with them about American values or things like that, but they are learning. These kids, I mean, in some ways, I just feel sorry for them because they are learning about 3-4 cultures, and that is language, that is food, that is how you tell stories, and what family means, and what it means to be part of a family, what community means. I mean, there's a whole lot of definitions, and so sometimes I feel for them because they go to school and they tell them this is what a family is supposed to be, and they come home and like there's a whole new definition of family is or what community is. And so but they have to figure out a way to manage, to navigate that space, because it's important that they do for themselves and for the future too. So anyways, just thought I would kind of talk about values today because values are really important. And the values that I want to focus on specifically is in a question that I asked a friend of mine once, who asked me about how I do it. Like, how do you do it? How do you raise so many kids? How do you raise so many boys, right? And they just happen to have only one child. And, and he was really happy to share with me about, how they are blessed to have child care, which is really important, daycare and things like that. And I think that's really important. It's definitely is a blessing that we usually don't pay attention to, to be able to leave kids somewhere and to go to work, something that not everybody has. It still is not enough, I don't think that's still enough, especially here in the U.S. when you think about other Western countries and the support that families have. But that's a topic for another day. The question is just around values, right? And I remember him talking to me about the fact that we were losing money. He said because I told him, like, we don't put our kids into daycare, no childcare. That's a personal decision. That's a conscious decision, which is grounded in many different things. And his response was, you're losing money. Have you thought about the fact that you're losing money? And I remember me kind of just, taking a minute and then thinking through that, what he's just saying to me about like you're losing money. And I said, have you ever thought about the fact that you're losing value? And it was an interesting conversation that I think would be really great to kind of just share about. And because he wanted to know, like, what does that mean? I'm losing value, I say, you're losing money. You say, I'm losing value, and I don't understand that. And I said, I'd be happy to kind of share with you. And that's a place where I want to share today. It's about value, right? What's our value system? And please, I'm just going to be clear here. This is not to condemn anyone. I got to tell you this. There's no manuscript. There's no guidelines. There is no, here's kind of like, a book of tips, if you will, about how to raise kids. Because every family is different. And even within a family, every kid is different. If you've been a parent and you've been paying attention, you would know that every single child has different needs. The way that you bring up one child is not going to be the same that you bring up another child, because some kids are going to be very social and some kids won't be very social. Some kids are going to be, lovey-dovey and other kids aren't going to be that much. They would want to have their private, space and things like that, even when they're still a child. And so the amount of love you get to spend toward them, the amount of like care you get to give them, you have to balance it. And that means really paying attention to your kids. And so if anybody ever told you that there is a guidelines out there, a book of guidelines around parenting, don't waste your money on it, even 1 cent, because there's no such a thing. You learn by experience. That's just, like from my own experience, that's what it is. You learn by experience. By doing, you learn. You grow, you become better. You make mistakes. As I said, every family is different and every kid is different. So, for those of you aspiring parents, I just want you to know there's no such thing as a guidelines. Nothing. There's no such thing as a guide toward to better parenting and all that. So whatever you want to call it, right? It doesn't exist. And if anybody tried to write one, I would just ask them to write one based on their own personal experience, because kids are different, families are different, cultures are different, worldviews are different, values are different, right? All those things have to be taken into account. And so I'm sharing you from my personal perspective, not to say you need to pick these things up and run with them, because like I said, it's all different. Everybody is different. But back to our question of values. And so when my friend said, you're losing money, and I said you're losing value, and he wanted to know like what I meant by that. And my next question to him was, it's all great y'all are making money, but who's really raising your kids? And that was really intentional, kind of like in the moment, like was really intentional about like who is really raising your kids, right? Because it's one thing to say we're making money and kids are somewhere else, and that's a good thing. I'm not judging. As I said, family is different, everybody is different. So please don't take this as being judgmental. I'm not judging, I'm just sharing. I'm basically trying to kind of generate a conversation, so that, and also kind of just some thinking through that. And that's what I want to come back to. It's around values. And we all put values in different places, right? And parenting definitely and certainly, there's a lot of values that go with that. And me asking my friends, like, who's raising your kids, kind of in some ways triggered him, And he went like, what do you mean by that? Of course we are. We're raising him. I said, okay, I see that. Are you sure about that? So we went into a conversation about like how many times, how much time are you spending at work? You just spend 8 to 10 hours at work every day. And by the time you're done work, you're super tired. And you get home, you go by the daycare, you pick up your kid. When you get home, you're probably going to spend like maybe 3 to 4 hours, taking gift between dinner and what you get to do, but like how much of it do you really get to do? And that is assuming that on the weekend, you don't have work, because some people's work is like it's continuous, right? It's not something that ends. You have to continue doing it. And so when we started talking about like, specifics, because for him it was more like, well, a kid is spending time at the daycare, and then, when we're done at the end of the day, we're getting the kid back. And then I said, yeah, but how much time are you really spending with the kid? And it's not really about, it's not about, for me, it was a place of like, you need to choose between making money or sacrificing that to raise the kids your own way. And it doesn't have to be that. And if you've done it differently, I certainly welcome, different point of views on that. But that's just my point of view, especially in this culture here, where there's just, so many beliefs and values and point system and things that are just like, all over the place. And again, like I said, everybody is entitled to their own ways and how they want to raise their kids and live their lives. And that's really, that's okay. We all have our own, but as an African raised, man, certain values and certain way of looking at things, like are above everything else, right? They trump, let me just use that word. They trump money. Like, for me, it's like, as I share with my friend, like, we'd rather make less money and raise our kids with our own values, like our own set of values. Because what's interesting is some of my friends, like, I talk to even now today, they ask me questions that are like, wow, I can't believe you're asking me that about like your own kid. Like, this is your kid. But it tells me that you don't really know your kid, because you thought you knew your kid. And it goes back to like, when they were growing up, like how much time did you really spend with them? How much did you help them? How much did you instill in them to become the kids you want them to become? I get it. At the end of the day, they're going to be kids and they're going to do what they want. And that's true. But those foundational values though, whose values are those? And this is where I went with my friends back and forth, where it was more like, no, your kid is spending 8 to 10 hours with somebody else, right? Whom you're paying money, who has their own set of values, unless you're okay with that. And that later on in life, you don't come back to say, you know what? You don't look anything like me, or you don't behave anything like me, or you do not reflect my values, right? If you're okay not having to say that or regret anything, then that's perfectly fine. And I think that's something that, everybody have to kind of think about, especially, families who's coming here, newly kind of arriving families. And I would say that's also kind of like a product of a system here, right? Where people are just worked until, to death, really. And there is not enough time to be able to raise kids with certain set of values. And those of us who do are blessed. I consider that a blessing that we're able to raise all of our boys with our own values. Our kids is never going to daycare, never going to childcare, because that was like that was a personal decision that came at a cost. Because he was right. We sacrificed so much, like in terms of income, a lot was sacrificed, like just really plenty was sacrificed. And was that worth it? Yes, it was worth it, because then you instill certain values in your kids that in the future you want to see, right? You're there with them, you're participating, you're doing things, you're doing certain things, you're like prepping them in a way that you know how, because you understand the world in a different way, and let me put it this way. Again, I'm not being judgmental, don't get me wrong here. Even if someone with who understand African culture, right? Let's say they own a daycare, it's still gonna be different, because there are just certain values that are different from my own values. So it's just gonna be different. It's not going to be the same, right? And again, it's like it's a choice, it's a decisions that people have to make. But what's fascinating to me is again, I'm speaking for my friends. Some of them, they kind of know themselves, may see this video here. I'm not naming them or anybody else, who come afterward and then they start to say, my God, this kid does, I don't even know who this kid is. And I'm like, remember what I told you about values? Excuse me. It's those decisions, those choices, those earlier in life choices that more often they get reflected, once kids are growing up. So it's important to kind of think through, especially for young parents or those who are kind of like aspiring parents. Really think, because you're going to have a tough decision to make. And for me, it's an easier decision. It is money or values, right? And some people have managed both of them and they've been really successful. It's not always like, I don't want to generalize it, but whichever way you choose, make sure that you're okay with it, whatever the outcome down the line, right? It becomes an issue when down the line people say, those aren't my values. But what did you expect? Those aren't supposed to be your values because you did not raise your kids. Somebody else did. Money back was a great thing to have, right? You're making more money, but somebody else is really raising your kids because they're going to raise your kid based on their own values. And if you're okay with that, while you make money, that's all good. And make sure you don't have any regrets down the line, right? When you start looking back and say, I do not recognize this child. This is definitely not my child, right? And I'm not saying those who raise the kids, with their values and suddenly the kids is gonna be perfect. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, while we parent, we have to you have to be mindful of the decisions you're making, because the decisions you're making, especially earlier on, they have an impact down the line. I remember being in a workplace that I'm not going to name, and I see these little kids, really young kids in like 6th grade, 7th grade, where I'm just trying to say, hey, you are not supposed to do that. And you hear a little kid tell you, like, you can't tell me what to do, you're not my dad. And they mean that. They're really serious with that, right? And you're thinking, wow. But then you get to meet the parents, and the parents is like, I don't know where that's coming from. But then you learn a little bit more the story, and then a different picture emerges, right? So be present in your kid's life is really important, and mind the values that your kids are being raised with. Even when they go to school, they go to school, they spend hours at school, right? The kids will go to school from like 7 all the way to 1 or to 2 to 3. How intentional are you to make sure that what they're learning in school, you are adding to, and some of it really countering it, with the values that to be able to develop this person with the values that to be your values, the right values, good values, because again, those are defined individually. I'm not going to say my values are better than everybody else's values, but my values are right values for me, and are right values for my family, and right values for my kids. And so as they grow up, I want to be able to say, hey, this is how I grew up, and here are the values that I have. This is the values that I grew up with as it relates to, how you speak to grown-ups, how you speak to adults, how you respond to your teachers, how you comport yourself in class, for example, or like how you eat and all kinds of stuff, right? Here's what I know to be the right way, the values that you should have, you should carry with you. But they're going to go out there and see other values, and they'll have to decide. But at least they have a choice. It becomes an issue where it's like, no, I'm not even going to pay too much attention to that. You know what? They are okay. They're going to school. They're getting an education. They're getting values in there. Yes. But the teachers who's teaching them may be teaching them a curriculum, but that teacher also has their own set of values. They're in some ways, they're instilling in the kid. And when your kid start to see They teach her as more of like a value center, moral authority, right? More than you as a parent. There's trouble. There is trouble for me. There's trouble, right? It means absence. It means lack of participation. It means trouble in the future. And so I've tried as much time as I can as possible to just be there. Make sure that I'm countering those things, right? So that whatever they're bringing to school, I can counter it. Making sure again that I'm really providing that other set of value to balance what else they're hearing and what else they're seeing, and making sure that nobody else's value that's outside of our house has more influence on them. What the future is gonna bring is not my problem. I'm not worried about that. Eventually they'll have to make up their mind and decide which values they want to get. But I want to make sure that they at least know, here are the values that I grew up with, and here's the good thing about those values, and here is where those values has gotten me. And so as I close this one right today, just really wanted to kind of speak to that and encouraging you all to kind of think, again, daycare, childcare all sounds great. Making money all sounds great, but there's also a side effect to that, and it's something to think about. And more importantly, to really think about, like, who's raising my kids, right? Am I raising my kids? Are they growing up with the values that I would like for them to grow up with? And sometimes you start to see those, little signs here and there, especially when they start to get a certain age, right? 10, 11, you start to see some things. I'm always very proud when somebody says, are those your kids? Yes. And they say, I always hear, like, your kids are well-mannered, And that's a moment of pride for me. Because every time I look at my wife and I'm like, yeah, those foundational things that we did, we're starting to see the fruits of it, right? And we want to continue, because it doesn't end here. Once a parent, always a parent. You always guide, and you're always there, and you have always continue to provide guidance, right? But we really sacrifice that much from an early going for them to get to a place where everybody looks at them and say, these kids really have values. They have moral values. They have manners, right? And for me, it's even bigger than that. Because the way I was raised is, your kids represent you. They represent your family. They carry a name. They carry a certain bloodline, right? And so it matters. It's important that they represent that which they carry with them. And that's why values are more important. Were more important to us, and still are more important to us than money. Again, I'm going to say that we were fortunate, blessed enough to be in the position of that we're in, that we could do that. We could sacrifice income to be able to raise them in our own ways and struggle through that. And if you're able to, I would strongly encourage you to think about that. But if you're aspiring to be a parent, I would encourage you again to think about, who do you want to raise your kids, right? And what does that mean? If you want to raise your kids with your values, there's a price to be paid. And are you willing to pay that price? And sometimes maybe you pay that price now, and you reap the reward in the future, and sometimes you don't, and then you still reap rewards in the future. So something to think about. I'm going to end this one right here today. Again, don't forget to subscribe and, comment and send in your thoughts and, other things. How have you managed it, between values and income? What is the thing that you've kind of prioritized, and how have you done it? That'd be great. It'd be really nice to hear from you. I appreciate you for tuning in. Until next time, I say ciao. All right. Asante. Take care.